And actually, I think our audio is cleared up. Keith, are you there?
Yes, I am. Yeah, excellent. Good morning. My name is Keith O'Connell, and as Ray just mentioned, I'd like to welcome you all to the Crazy Fast Application Performance Management webinar. I'm a delivery manager here at XTIVIA, founded in 1992. XTIVIA is a customer-driven software and IT consulting company which utilizes a 100% onshore delivery method to drive consistent, high-quality results for our clients in the areas of database management,
We're excited to be partnering with XTIVIA on the webinar today. So quick agenda. So we did the XTIVIA introduction and welcome. We're going to go through one slide on Riverbed Performance Management, introduction to our company and what we do. Agile Development, talk a little bit about that. Traditional monitoring and how you can improve upon what's available widely today. Recent customer case, we're going to actually show you how we solved a real problem fast. We're going to introduce Riverbed AppInternals Xpert APM solution and actually do a demo of that. And we're joined today by Keith from XTIVIA and myself from Riverbed and Brandon Roberts also from Riverbed. So thanks for everyone joining us today. So just a quick background on Riverbed. Riverbed started with WAN acceleration and over the past 6 years or so has begun adding solutions around not only application acceleration, which is what they started with WAN acceleration, but also now application performance management and network performance management. So kind of some of the key functional areas for the division that I work for is some end user experience functionality, APM, application performance management, and then also NPM, network performance management, and as well as analytics and reporting, which complement all of those things. So very powerful offerings so that, frankly, your application issues have nowhere to hide because all the functionality is there in one solution. So it's real nice. So Agile, we all know and love Agile. It's been a really huge impact over the past several years to help us deliver additional functionality to the business as quickly as possible. As opposed to waterfall type development methodology where you design and spec out everything on paper first and then you go develop, and the business may have changed by the time you're actually able to deliver. So Agile is much better. But the problem with Agile that you guys have run into, I'm sure, in the actual field, if you look at this chart from Wikipedia, you can see that in the Agile software development lifecycle, there's actually not specified performance engineering. So performance tuning, performance testing, speed testing, that kind of thing is actually not part of the process. Agile focuses more on constant releases and continuous improvement, which is great. Problem is that production starts running into issues with all this software that's been written fast, and now we have production issues that happen. So what do? You don't get rid of Agile. You just go for a better Agile. So you retain Agile development release frequency and reduce risks inherent with Agile speed. So how do you do that? Well, I'm glad you asked. So Riverbed Application Performance Engineering Lifecycle Approach is centered on AppInternals APM solution. And this APM solution is able to be utilized in the development department before you actually release to QA or to production. So that solution, easy to use, helps you diagnose performance issues early and improve your application design and implementation. So you're able to test for things like speed, things like reliability, things like do we have any exceptions we're going to be generating in production if we release this code, that kind of thing. So you're able to really have a strong validation before you even pass to QA. And then the QA department is able to use the same screens, and which really creates collaboration, by the way, and you're able to validate application is ready to go to perform in production. So you're going to load test your application, functional test your application, and through that, look at what's happening in the back end, and AppInternals APM is going to give you diagnosis to anything that may have been missed. And then it can just go right back to dev for those tweaks before coming back for validation and then production. Again, same screen, so it's very, very easy to use and huge increase in collaboration. And then production, let's face it, we have production issues. Sometimes those are code related, sometimes those are infrastructure related or other environmental things. A host of things can cause these speed and performance degradations that happen with our core applications that mean a lot to our business. So production has the same screens to troubleshoot with, to quickly identify root cause and address design, code, system, or config issues. And so what happens with that is that because they have the same screens and some built-in sharing capability, production can send that information right over to dev, and oh, by the way, they're used to seeing all those same screens too. There's no training. There's just sharing. So all the way through the life cycle, there's sharing, there's visibility, and there's performance improvement. So, little introduction on AppInternals Xpert. It is an APM solution leveraging big data analytics. We're actually the only one that uses a big data solution. It provides instrumentation on your servers to provide fast insight into application performance. Some key capabilities. AppInternals is kind of like a DVR for your apps, meaning that it's always recording for you. You can rewind time, and you never miss an issue. Now, we don't do any sampling, which is also unique to us. So sampling means that maybe one application transaction is grabbed every 30 minutes or every minute or some sort of sampling rate, some kind of rate like that. But what we do is we actually have 1 second capture of application transactions. So we do no sampling, you never miss an issue. You can rewind time just like a DVR. So we like to use that fun analogy. It's also like an X-ray, giving visibility into every step of the application transaction. So we're able to follow your users as they traverse the servers and as they're exercising the application. We're able to see exactly what's going on within the servers and see what the issues might be. Also, fast 3-step or 3-click troubleshooting is also kind of fundamental to what we do. You'll see that as well in just a moment, actually. No app blind spots, but low overhead. So some people say, Brian, it sounds like you guys are doing a lot of capturing and you're giving a lot of visibility, which is great, but what's that mean to the server overhead? And the good news is that it's 1% to 2% overhead. It's very thin and light. It's actually made for production. Some of our competition were made for development and have tried to move to production and have struggled with overhead a lot. You guys have probably heard some of those overhead stories, but we are made for production. So that's why it's such a low overhead solution. So we cover any .NET or Java applications. That could be out-of-the-box package software. Maybe it's package software that you used just as it came, or maybe you customized it. Also custom apps as well. So we're able to cover any of those, which is a huge benefit to your customers. So let's talk about end-to-end transactional visibility through a full APM solution versus traditional monitoring. Now, traditional monitoring could be some of these good solutions that do quality SNMP monitoring or log file gathering or network sniffers, these kinds of things that are grabbing packets. They all have their place. They've all helped us. The problem is that when it's not an issue with a WAN issue or a LAN issue, or if it's other types of issues, you need a full APM approach, because as you can see in this case, this user is experiencing a 32 second page time, but traditional tools are just showing, hey, we're green. But really the issue is that he's having a slow response time. So what's the issue? So with full APM, you have all the back end available for diagnosis, and that's what we are. We're a full APM solution, and we can see that this user was experiencing a lot of database delay and some app tier delay as well. And they were right. The LAN and the WAN, they were good, and even the web tier was pretty good. So we could see that with full APM, you have the end-to-end approach. Now, the nice thing about Riverbed is that we also have the network tools. So we have the network monitoring, network capture side too, which is very unique in the sense that you could get all this quality front-end information, all the traditional monitoring that you need in the same solution that ties and works together with all the back end. So you've got the front and the back end covered with Riverbed, which is really nice. So just a quick architecture slide. I'll just do a very salesy version of this. So basically, we install a little piece of code on the server tiers, and we also have a piece of optional JavaScript that you can put on the end user client as well. And what we do is we just simply, every time a user uses your app, we start following that experience and capturing any code or environmental issues as they traverse any server path that they need to traverse. So that includes load balancing, virtualization, all those kinds of things, because we have obviously very complex environments now. So we capture that information, and then we roll those up to a management layer. And then all you deal with is the dashboards, which are real-time dashboards, and you're able to actually, they aren't just for reporting. They're very good at that, and they're very easy to set up, actually. But you can actually drill down into the troubleshooting tools from the dashboards, too. So I like to call them, they're working person dashboards. Also, we have the search engine. I'll show you in a couple of seconds. And so pretty much everything rolls up into the search engine and dashboards. So a recent customer case study. This is a really, frankly, a painful customer situation where, large insurance company, they inherited the application, which I'm sure you guys have inherited some apps before too, and you're not always sure why it was coded that way or why it was customized that way. So they inherited a lot of customization in their code, and the app and dev teams were in the room with us when we met them, and they were trying to collaborate and work together more. They had no application monitoring or analysis currently. A lot of log file viewing is how they were troubleshooting, and I'm sure there's groans out there as I say log file viewing because you guys have done that. They had a host of intermittent performance problems. The director in charge of that particular app, personally, the week before we went on site, spent 3.5 hours to solve one issue with the application. And again, this is a chronic issue that was 3 or 4 months old overall. The search functionality was frequently slow within this particular app. At times it would actually run and then fail. They had distributed teams around the world in various locations, unable to collaborate. So this particular team happens to be in India, but it could have been in Atlanta. It doesn't matter. The fact is it was remote. When you get into remote teams, they need performance information too if they're going to be improving your app in the next version, or if they're going to be helping to QA things, or if they're going to help troubleshoot production issues. And so they had no visibility. They were very much on their own, and yet responsible for adding new functionality and making fixes. So that's a bad idea. And so they were struggling with that. And they had no way to validate the performance of new code releases. They were about to upgrade to the major new software version. So the challenge with the business, the business world today is that executives are trying to drive change, and that's great, and they're trying to drive the new version and the new functionality, not necessarily being fully aware of some of the pain that's happening behind the scenes. So that's an issue that we help to resolve. So I'm going to actually solve this customer's problem, and I'm going to show you how we solved it in 3 clicks. So this is our search engine. So you can simply type your transaction query here, or a fun search that you can do as well is just type nothing here and you hit click search, and it'll just bring up everything slow, which is neat. In this case, we have a response time here of around 41 seconds for a particular user. This is a real customer screen, so I had to anonymize it. But you actually had a username here. We track it at granular level. We have every user, login name, everything about them, and everything about their experience. So about a 41-second response time here at 2:17 p.m. So with one click, I've already brought up everything that's slow, and I have a target user I'm going to use to diagnose why this search functionality is so darn slow. So I'm going to go ahead and click Analyze. And now I have a runtime map. And again, it's very small. We had to anonymize this because it's a real screen. But you can see that there's server tiers here. And let's just pretend this is Bob Smith. So if Bob hit this particular set of servers, Jane in the next moment may, with load balancing and with virtualization, may be hitting a different, or partially different set of servers. And so with that, it's important that you have actually a runtime map of the application, not just kind of an engineering diagram, which is kind of static, or an average type of a diagram. This is the actual servers, and one of them you can kind of tell it's very small on purpose, but it's a virtual server here, as you can see. Okay, so with the second click, I already have a summary of information. I see the largest delay category was web service, web method. The slowest tier was this virtual server tier. And there are 8 exceptions. So why did Bob have 8 exceptions from just trying to search within his app, right? So I'm actually going to focus my third click on exceptions. But just so you know, You have these other like delays. That's a logical place to troubleshoot, database, URLs. So you have a lot of information a click away. But my third click is going to be on exceptions because that's kind of a glaring issue there, 8 exceptions with one use of the app. So the third click, I did find the issue. The application architecture tried to perform a search, which Bob was attempting to do, and it was resulting in a timeout, and he was getting an end-user error message after he waited 40 seconds. Normally, you get an error message when it's an exception like this. You get an immediate kickback. This is a little bit unusual in that it actually did process for roughly 41 seconds, and then it kicked back an error. So we captured everything about that, so you don't miss it. So you don't have to have that issue happen again because we have a whole big data store of every transaction that ran into this. So you can diagnose exactly what happened and never miss an issue. So all the details and the code that was executing for him are captured. And the person who used it before him, who might have even been successful, because that's called an intermittent problem, and the person after him, who might have been successful, and then the person later on who was not successful. So these intermittent issues are a real pain. That's why you need a big data solution like ours that captures everything all the time, no sampling. And development can now fix the issue. The business moves forward. So this issue here is really a profound one because they struggled with it for 3 or 4 months. So with that, I'm actually going to pass you over to Brandon Roberts, Senior Application Solutions Engineer with Riverbed Performance Management, and we're going to show you some monitoring and troubleshooting with AppInternals with a LifeRay portal installation. So with that, I will pass over to Brandon. Great.
Hey guys, it's Brian. Do you guys have any quick questions right now about the slides that we went over before I jump into a live demo? I know we're saving them for at the end, but if there's any quick questions, something you didn't understand, I don't want to confuse you more by showing you the live demo when you have a question. Nope. All right.
So guys, remember there's a question bubble that you can utilize. So go ahead and make sure you use that because we usually are able to capture all the questions and get them at the end. So do feel free because we are eager to answer those. Good point.
And can everybody see my screen?
Looks good.
Okay, cool. What we're looking at is what Brian Howard just showed off. It was Transaction Trace Warehouse. It is a repository of all of the transactions of which we capture. It's a search engine so that you can search against any parameter within the transaction, whether that's the response time, the user, the path that's being hit, the IP, the number of exceptions, the delays, etc. You can search it and at your fingertips figure out why a transaction might be slow, or why it might be fast, or why it might have just the sheer number of exceptions. Up here at the top left-hand corner, we have the time frame. I have it right now set from 10:06 December 4th to 10:06 December 5th. I've got a blank query here, but just to give you an idea of what all we can show, you can go against class name, you can go against cookie information, header information, status information, if there are any faults in the SOAP code, SQL, just pretty much everything that's within the transaction is searchable here. Our operators are equals, does not equal, starts with, and does not start with. And what I'm looking at right here is just a blank filter searching the slowest 10,000 transactions for the past day, roughly around 10:06 a.m. And then underneath that, I'll say 451 matching transactions I've defined as slowest. And over here on the right-hand side, I'll show you a summary of delays. So everything that I'm looking at right now, 36% of the delays were JSP code, 31% were application code, followed by 17% of JWC calls. So if I were looking at this, and hopefully you guys can see it on your side, but there's a bunch of blue dots here. These dots both indicate the time a transaction occurred and how long that transaction took. I've zoomed in to this particular time frame because we are simulating the load test, so I was trying to find some transactions that looked better than others. So I'm looking at this. Let's pretend I wanted to look at, this 3.51 second transaction from user 10197. It's highlighted down here at the bottom. I'm going to click the View Transaction Details, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to parse out that transaction. And we'll wait for this to load here. I just opened it actually a second ago. And you can quickly see that we put together a transaction map. So you see where the front-end user hit the LifeRay 01 machine, which made a back-end database call, MySQL. Underneath that, you'll see the backend summary. So I can tell you, in this case, it's only one tier, but this is multi-tiered. So if you did have multiple tiers, I'll give you a percentage as to, okay, well, tier 1 seems to be where most of your delays are instead of any other tier. In this case, it's only the one tier, and all of our delays of the 3.7 some odd seconds happens to have occurred in this tier. And I can see 99% of that entire delay was due to a portal.search.lucene helper get snippet. And then I'll also say that, yeah, we made 8 database requests. If I wanted to look into any further, I can click delays, which is going to give me just an exploded view of that pie chart, which is going to highlight the same thing. The get snippet seems to be the issue in this particular case. If I had an issue with any SQL calls, this is where they would be. I'm showing you the actual SQL call, the number of calls, and the delay and the duration. But what I'll click in is top calls. Since I already know from the summary that get snippet seems to be 91% of the entire delay here, and as far as that code's concerned, it occurred, for 99% of the delay. Top calls, I'll click that, and I quickly see that Lucene get snippet method made 1,396 calls. So I can quickly throw this off to development if I thought that maybe we shouldn't be making that many calls for a single transaction, because it did dictate about 3.19 seconds of delay. If I thought, though, this was a performance issue, maybe we had a bottleneck of some sort, maybe that number of calls, 1,396, maybe that's normal, but maybe we had a bottleneck. So I'll click performance metrics. What this will do is this will compare this transaction to the performance metrics at the time this occurred on that box. And you'll see that CPU was only at 31%, garbage collection time was at 7%, percentage memory free was 35%, and the heap consumed was 47 megs a second. None of those are outliers, so I can quickly conclude that this wasn't a performance issue, this wasn't a bottleneck of any kind, but I do have just a lot of calls, so I might want to look into that. You'll also see at the top, I've paired this with front-end data. This is what we call end-user experience data. This is where you can see that the user's using a Chrome browser, and his first request to first byte, meaning the second he hit this URL and pressed enter, it went through its merry way to our back-end server. And then once our back-end server did some processing, it came back to him. So I've paired that 3.52 seconds of first request to first byte out of being 3.51 seconds of my own delay. So it's not an issue with his WAN. It doesn't appear to be an issue with his LAN. It doesn't appear to be an issue with his client side anything. The delay in this case happens to be on my side. If I wanted to look at this issue and say, okay, well, let's pretend his name's Bob. If Bob was experiencing this get snippet issue of just a sheer amount of calls, who else might have been experiencing this issue? You can go up here to the search engine. It is a Google-like search engine, so even if you don't remember the class name but you remember the method name, get snippet, you can start to type that out. So I'll say get snippet method name. Let's go ahead and search for every transaction that has that. Let me explode this view and go for the past week, and I can tell you, let me zoom in here because maybe a week was too long. So here I'm looking at past couple of days or past day, and you can kind of see these blue dots that are kind of clustered up. And this is actually our simulated test, so you can see when we're actually running the test. But quickly, graphically, I can say, okay, well, I can tell somebody's running a test and for X duration just because I see all of these dots happening. But if that's just one example of a search for get snippet, let me go ahead and back out. And let's just look at everything for the past day or so. And let's jump out to a week. I'm trying to get some decent looking cool data here for you guys. So you can quickly zoom in. These are all transactions that took 50 seconds and more, and I can zoom in and we can click on those as well. Let me show top 50. But you can quickly go through each individual transaction, see the web page that they hit, and then over here on the right hand side you'll see the delay percentages. So I can pair that up with any search criteria I would like.
Hey guys, I want to highlight something that Brandon. I really want to highlight something that you did, Brandon, for these guys. So, how do you use a tool like this to not just be a troubleshooter, but also to become proactive? Do you guys see what Brandon just did? He diagnosed an issue, pulled up all that information, went through the tabs to find out what was going on, found out what, where the delay was, and then he went and he took that piece of code and he searched explicitly for that to find out why. To find out, is it always slow? Is this something that we should add to the development project, project board? That's a way for management and for anybody who wants to be proactive to take a troubleshooting incident and then go say, how often does that happen? When did it start occurring? We had that new release, a month ago. Hasn't been happening ever since we, had the new release. Did it used to run fast? You can compare before and after because you have everything. And so I love what Brandon did because it really highlights how to take an incident and become proactive with that. And that's how you can have permanent change.
Yep. So this is Transaction Trace Warehouse in all of its glory. I will comment again. We keep everything that your hard drive allows. So we'll actually start to purge content once we've filled up your disk space, and we will purge the oldest at that time. But assuming you have unlimited resources, we will fill this up with as many transactions as possible. In this particular case, for this LifeRay application, I can click status up here, and I can tell you that the earliest transaction we have is from January 24th, roughly a year ago. And I have around 118 million transactions using about 15 gigs of disk space. So I can search all the way through back a year's worth of transaction data and see if what I'm experiencing right now, maybe it's seasonal. Maybe it should be, it's expected for this particular season, but it should be unexpected, throughout the whole year. So it's just a lot of information at your fingertips so that you can, kind of mine and construct a search filter to find exactly what you're looking for. All of this information feeds up into a central dashboard. So if you had a knock and you walk in, in the early morning, you want to see bright colors, you want to see your reds, you want to see your yellows, you want to see your greens, you can do just that. And I'll show you a dashboard here that I've set up. And let's let this pull up here. So somebody can load this, and they don't have to know anything about your application. All they have to know is red's bad, yellow's we're getting bad, right? So I'll look at this. I don't know too much about the LifeRay application, but I know just by looking at this from the recent days worth of data that the process CPU, I have a bunch of red. What's going on with that red? And I can quickly hover over it, and I see that we're violating a lot of dynamic limits. The dynamic limits is actually our own limit that changes based on conditions for a certain time range. So say you have a computer and it's always running, at 90% CPU utilization, and it bumps up to 93% CPU utilization. Well, since you're always running at an average of 90%, you only went up 3%, that may or may not violate a dynamic limit. But if you jumped up from 90% to, say, 99%, that would probably be a violation of the dynamic limit, and we would show red. If ever you wanted to get more granular on anything that you're looking at, so these are a bunch of bars, what does it all mean, Basil? Just double-click, and we'll show you a more granular level. And then we will go ahead and sort that, and I'll say, okay, well, out of these 3 tiers that you're looking at, you have LifeRay 01, and it's at 10.19%, and I see it spike up over here. And I can quickly double-click that and kind of see what's going on. And I can tell you that CPU usage is low just to begin with, but yes, it did violate it because we did spike up to around 10%. So when it was, 0.5%, 9.5% increase in spike, that's a pretty big difference. Underneath that, I'm showing you heap consumption rate. Underneath that is the world map. Unfortunately, right now we're doing a simulated load, so I'm not getting any data from a dashboard level, but I'll show you the world map here in a second. And then on the right-hand side, I'm showing you end-user experience. Hopefully you guys can see that. It's a couple of notches because the experience, for the most part, doesn't change too much. But once again, if there is anything that you want to look at, you can quickly double-click and get a more granular view. Underneath that, you're looking at page views. So I can quickly correlate, are people suffering due to performance because there's just a lot of people trying to access the same page at the same time, or is it, is it more of an environmental issue? Maybe I need to look at, something else on the application. So underneath that, I have Java component response times. I've broken that up amongst the remote, the servlet, the application code, the JSP code, and the JDBC calls. So I can quickly say, just looking at this, yeah, my processor spiked a little bit, still not too bad, but it did violate a dynamic limit. My percentage memory, we're still in the green, everything looks good. My end-user experience seems to look decent for right now. Underneath that, page views, I am getting more page views right at this moment, about 50 or so, or 28 it looks like. So that is a difference. And underneath that, out of all of my delays, nothing too major except for what happened yesterday around 12 at a 6.11 minute delay. But that doesn't really concern me right now because, as you can see, there's a 2.36 second delay. Anything on here, if I were looking at this and I said, okay, well, you see this spike over here, you see the sheer number of page views, who all was affected? Show me right now from an end user experience those exact page views. So I right click, I say launch, and I say open search page. And this opens up to browser metrics, which is our end user experience search capabilities, and this allows you to search on the end user experience, the front end, right? So out of everything that you've seen over here at the 10 o'clock mark, I'll just highlight that because that's what I was looking at anyways. I've already pre-filled out this application ID. It's already set the time frame, and I'm looking at those exact transactions that made up that delay on my dashboard. So I can see the user IP. I can see a couple of these response times greater than a minute. I'll click one that's maybe at 5 seconds here, and we'll scroll down and we'll see what's going on. I see the URL he's accessed. I see the IP. He's accessing the application liferay. He's using a Chrome 31 browser on a Windows platform, and he's based out of United States, Texas, local. So he's local. But I can tell you, out of front-end delays, 5.61 seconds, first request to first byte, I've paired that with the back-end delay. So I can tell you out of that 5 seconds, roughly less than a second was database call, but 4.6 some odd seconds was application code. I can double-click and I can say, okay, that's roughly 80% of the application code. So my application here is chugging away. And you can click on any one of these and take a look to see what's going on. I'll go back to that transaction just because it looked kind of cool. So if I wanted to get the developer involved or get another set of eyes on this, but we need to look at it on more of an application level, I'll then quickly click Server Data, and then there's a link here that says jump from end user experience back to transaction trace warehouse. And I'll just do that just to show you the flow here. So I'll do that. We've jumped back into transaction trace warehouse. We have found that exact transaction, and right now we're going to open it up and analyze that transaction. So we'll give this a couple of seconds. There it goes. So you'll see I still have that front end, 5.78 seconds, right? But now the emphasis is on the back end. Okay, well, just so you know, here's the front end data, but let me show you what was going on. Look at that. It's that get snippet again. Man, I've got a lot of delays around that get snippet. Might be something to look into. So that's our dashboards. It is I got logged out. It's what happens when you talk too much. Dashboards is multi-user, so if you were to sign on with your own credentials, you can look at a different dashboards that's pertinent to your job function, where somebody else can sign on and look at dashboards that are pertinent to their function. You can also share dashboards amongst everybody.
And when I was back in August, I went to the Op Network show, and I'm a sales guy, but I set up a dashboard, and I took the dashboards lab for AppInternals, and I set up a dashboard in less than 5 minutes, and I had never touched the interface before. So, those dashboards that he showed you with, that he was able to drill down from, looking at high-level kind of reporting, real-time reporting, drilling down into a specific user and a specific problem, ending up all the way down to the code with that awesome path that we just saw so quickly. So I was able to set up a dashboard like that myself in less than 5 minutes. So it truly is something that is very approachable, very doable. And we have some executives who have a 50-inch plasma on their office wall where they're looking at key application health, and they will never drill down and troubleshoot, but they can see that high-level dashboard information of how it's going. And then other groups have a development dashboard, because these are basically widgets you get to select. So development level widgets, production monitoring level widgets, executive type widgets, and you just pick the ones that you want, but everybody gets to see a view of the performance that matters to them. So it's really, really powerful, and I love the workflow that you did, drilling down from literally a real-time report all the way down into the code.
Yep, good point. So what I've clicked in, what you guys are looking at real quick here, it's 10:35. We got a couple more minutes, then we can kind of do a Q&A. But what you're looking at now is the front end user experience piece. So I've showed you dashboards, I've showed you the back end view, but what about the front end view? What does that look like? Well, it's all GUI based. It's all accessible from the web browser. We only have the one liferay application, so based on my 7:25 a.m. to 10:35 a.m., I can tell you that 89% of all of those delays were time to first byte. Typically means that 89% of all those delays were probably my application or some network issue within my environment. And we'll check that out in a second. But I've once again kept that and paired that with my back-end view. I'm showing you the back-end summary of delays, so I can say that out of that time frame, your back-end 39% was application code, followed by 37% JSP, followed by 18% JDBC calls. I have a 1.7 average response time. There are 122 page views. And then I've got an OpDeck score, an AppDeck score, as you guys have probably referred to in the field, of 1.0, which is a good quality score. 1.0 is where you want to be at. So I'll click LifeRay just to show you guys what all we're bringing to the table in regards to metrics. And this is just kind of a bar chart of all of the, if I were to define this as a key transaction, I've only defined one key transaction as test, and you can see nobody's accessed that. It's always been other page views. But I can break that out amongst geography. I can break that amongst platform. We're only using Windows platform in this case, or based on browser. If I were to look at this from a different view here, let me click OS. Once again, pie chart of 100% Windows users. Apparently nobody in this shop is Linux accessing it. And then it's 100% Chrome users, right? From a geographical standpoint, I'll log where everything's coming from. So I can tell you that from the United States, the average response time was 1.73 seconds, and all the page views were from here. Which that makes sense, right? Because we're doing the load test from Texas locally. And that's pretty much it as far as my demo is concerned. Let me know if you guys had any questions, if you wanted me to drill down on something else more specific that maybe I didn't touch so far.
Good deal. Yeah, so go ahead and put those questions in the question area, and we'll get to those. We really appreciate that. But Brandon's right. If you can capture those now, it helps to, you'll have the context then of what you were seeing if you put the questions in now. So really good point. Brandon, that was great. If you are done with the demo piece, I'm going to go back for 2 more slides.
All right.
Great. Good deal. So how does all this, impact the business? Well, it has a pretty big impact. We have customers all over the world, instrumenting hundreds or thousands of servers, or just a small group of servers too. And what happens is that before they had AppInternals, they had this blame storm happening and finger pointing and war rooms and wasted time when an issue would occur. And now, because you have one interface that everybody can use and it works together, and because we have the network monitoring too as a company, we have the application and the network monitoring as a company, so now all the teams can work together to solve problems. So it's really a good story customers are using. So in summary, we're going to help empowering IT executives, app teams, dev teams, and yes, even network teams on the network side, even though we focused on the app side today, with faster apps and staff empowered to solve issues very quickly. We talked about the DVR for your apps. I love the screen that Brandon was showing you, and just how quickly he can just drill down all the way to the code. Even if in one of the screens he actually typed nothing, and it just showed him everything slow, and he drilled down from there. I mean, that's just how drop-dead easy it is, and just 3-click approach: search, analyze, root problem found. Production and development teams can now collaborate to solve application and production issues and release safer, faster code so that we can be agile. We can have an agile practice, but without releasing challenges into the production environment. And then teams will communicate with one-click diagnostic reports to eliminate finger pointing and give a single source of the truth. So all the information that we were troubleshooting from, for example, the Bob example, you can actually click that and it creates a report. And it's a static URL. You can pass that to another department, and they can pull up the exact same thing. It's a nice formatted report summary of what's going on and what was experienced. So that's just, there's built-in collaboration. We feel like that's a really, really big idea. So keep those questions coming and put those into the question module. And with that, I'm going to pass it to Keith, who will help us to navigate the question and answer process.
All right, great. Brandon, great job, by the way. Awesome run through on all of the AppInternals features and everything else. And that was a really good. It was actually very informative for me, and I've actually used the product before. So that's good stuff. Okay, so we do actually have several questions that have come in. I'm going to run through. I guess the first question I'm going to tackle here is. how long does it take to get the solution up and running?
To get the solution up and running, it usually takes more time for the customer to appropriate and to bypass all of the red tape within the politics of their infrastructure. But let's assume I can just come in and install this and get this up and running. This can typically be done in a matter of hours. My fastest on a proof of concept, I think, has been about 26 minutes, not 26 seconds. 26 seconds would be amazing, but about 26 minutes.
All right. So then, actually, and then another question from the same attendee: how far back can you store transactions in the search engine?
We can store the transactions as far back as you would like, and as far back as you have the disk space for. So, assuming if you have unlimited resources, we will keep every transaction that we've ever encountered.
And I mean, can you give us any idea of like what, like how much space do you need for a specific transaction on average, or I mean, just a general idea of how much disk space you'd normally want to allocate to this sort of thing?
Typically, for proof of concepts, we allocate about 100 gigs, and that'll keep a couple months worth of data. But what it comes down to is what exactly you want to monitor, how many objects, how many class packages you care to monitor, and then at what rate we're receiving those. So in the LifeRay case, because it is a test setup environment, we're not having too many page views, but you can see how we have 118 million transactions for the entire year, and we're only using about 15 gigs worth of space.
Cool.
Hey, by the way, Keith, it's kind of a good question too. So I think what the customer is getting at there, the underlying is that, you know, we want to be able to go back in time and compare. And Brandon even mentioned, you know, seasonality or other factors. We want to compare, how was performance for this code, before we upgraded, and how is it now? So that kind of comparison is something that we do, and keeping a lot of data like the customer is suggesting is a good idea, and it's not a lot of space, and then you can do that kind of historical comparative, and only we can do that because we capture everything all the time and make it searchable for you. So that is a really insightful question and good answer from Brandon as well.
And I'll make one comment. Being a developer, people will come up to you with what's running slow, but as a developer, everything's going to run perfect in your test environment. It usually always does. So when support comes to you and they say something's running slow, you need something to compare it to. If all I show you is everything that's slow all the time, great. I might have an idea of what's going slow, but it's easier to look at, okay, what does this same transaction look like if it were running fast? That'll offer a much more deeper dive, and I could probably come to the root cause much quicker.
Great. Next question, Keith.
I'm sorry, I had temporarily muted myself while Brandon was talking. We actually have another follow-up question on the storage of these transactions. One of the attendees would like to know where the data is stored. Is it stored in a central location, or is it stored locally on the actual on the servers themselves?
It's going to be stored local, so none of that's going to be going off to a cloud. For most customers will have security concerns if that were the case, but that'll be stored locally. You can put that onto a drive of your choice, as long as it's like a 15K or an SSD drive.
Great. Okay, so then let's see, another question regarding, and this actually is a question regarding thresholds. Can you set thresholds in the tool based on, say, on a per server basis, or based on the individual operations?
You can set a threshold to be a static value based on each metric. So if that metric is based on 2 different servers, you can certainly set that threshold to 2 different values across your server infrastructure. In the demo that I showed you, we did dynamic thresholds just because it's easier for us, and it shows a lot of cool colors. But yes, you can certainly remove that functionality and set them statically if you'd like.
All right, great. Okay. So another attendee has a different question, and this actually is I guess it was actually two questions. And I'll ask the first question, and then we'll follow up with the second. First off, can you easily compare performance between releases using this tool? And I think what they're getting at there is code releases, I guess, for the application being monitored.
Yes, you can. We offer a special mode that will start to record metrics and statistics against a certain time period so that you can perform a test against a certain version, pause it, and then perform that same test against, version number 2. That way it doesn't mess with any dynamic thresholds that we've actually created for you during regular runtime, but now we've created dynamic thresholds throughout that actual test. So I can tell you version 1 is running slower than version 2 in this case, or maybe it's vice versa.
Great. Okay, and then the second question that that this attendee had asked was, is there a code trace view of the data to show the flow of execution through the code?
Yes, we keep the entire call stack. So I'm not going to sample, I'm not going to purge anything from that aspect. Once it's been logged and written to our own proprietary database, that transaction will have the entire call stack. And furthermore, you can even view, if you've integrated that, or if you are the developer and you're working with Eclipse or Visual Studio, you can integrate that with an IDE so that you can see that call stack, and then you can quickly jump into your debugger machine and see the object of the class of where that might have occurred.
All right. Okay. So this next question is actually one relating to the cost of the product itself. And one of the attendees was curious about the licensing model and costs for the AppInternals product.
The cost is around $1 million. I kid. Our licensing model is quite simple. We license per managed node or per collector. You'll hear those two terms. They're the exact same thing. So what it comes down to is one operating system is one license. In this case, this is a Java machine running on a Linux box. So if you happen to have one Linux box that has, say, 32 JVMs running, that is still, at the end of the day, one license. It just happens to be in your favor because you get to now monitor 30 active running JVMs. We're not going to discriminate against a test box or a production box. It's going to be the exact same price.
All right. Okay, so let's see here. Okay, have another question here. Let's see, and the question is, can the search engine be utilized by different people at the same time for different purposes?
Absolutely. Everything that we're using, multiple tenants can log into and perform their own queries or look at their own dashboards at the same time.
By the way, that's kind of a good use case. We have customers where development is trying to go into the tool. By the way, development is often doesn't have enough access to production data, and they're having to get special permission or temporary access, these kinds of things. I even had one web developer tell me that her ability to troubleshoot is predicated on who's available to talk to in production, and so that's a shame, right? But it's actually a really good question. So development could be logging into the search engine to troubleshoot something, to help diagnose an issue that production gave to them, or just log in proactively so that they can find out where the hot spots are for what they need to improve in the next version. Management could be looking at to look at slicing and dicing on trends. We have a whole trends functionality that we didn't show you that you can actually do bucketing and look at where the top issues are we need to focus on. And then production could be solving a production issue. So yeah, multi-tenant is actually a key functionality, as Brandon mentioned.
All right. So then, all right, the next question we have here is, they are coming. there are still more questions coming in, so that's good. If you guys have any additional questions, keep them coming. So we do have. So this next question is, if you're running with multiple data servers, can this product be used by staff local to the POP, as well as roll-up data for global staff and management? So I think they're basically getting it. Yeah, you got it. So I think basically, so basically if they're running multiple data centers, I think they want to know if the product can be used locally to do a local analysis of traffic in the data center, as well as taking that data and pushing it out for like a global type analysis on all of the data centers that are in the organization.
Yes. If we're installed in all the data centers, you can customize that search query and quickly filter out to a single collector, a single operating system, or a slew of servers.
Okay. All right. Okay, next question. Do you provide any tie-ins to IDEs like Eclipse or Visual Studio?
Yes, we do.
Yep. All right. And next question is, I guess, and this is a follow-up question on licensing, I think. It's basically asking about the use of virtual machines with many virtual machine instances on a single hardware server. How does that work in terms of licensing?
Per operating system. So I'm not going to discriminate whether it's a physical box or a virtual machine, but if it's a physical box that's running 10 virtual machines and you want to monitor all 10 and they're all running a different operating system, that is 10 separate licenses.
All right. Okay. So
I'm impressed with the questions here. I'm very, very impressed with your customers. They're we knew they were sophisticated, but wow, good job, guys. Keep them coming.
I'm impressed at how quickly I can Google the answers.
Cool. So I guess a follow-up from that licensing question is that basically there would be a strong preference for sizing, basically big box sizing instead of sizing your VMs just in a very small fashion. Is that accurate?
Correct. It's I'd say you always want to size up the environment so you get a good idea of how many collectors or managed nodes you would like to implement. The more collectors we're going to have, the more data I can show you and the more stitching I have available, so I can show you a complete transaction versus having potential blind spots.
Okay. All right, so then, so another question here. How can I find out if a problem we encounter is a one-time issue or if it is something chronic happening in the environment?
How I did it earlier was I used the search engine. So once I found out in that case it was a get snippet issue that happened the one time that resulted in a 4-second delay, I then searched against any transactions that had that exact same get snippet. What I would do if this was an actual environment and the delays were greater is I would just couple that search with method, get snippet, and duration is greater than 3 seconds and show me those. But pretty quickly I can graphically see whether that's a chronic issue or if that was a one-off. In addition, we also have a reporting engine so that at the end of every day you can run a report and say, for this day's worth of data, what were the classes, what were the objects, what were the methods that contributed to the most of my delays, and show me in an accumulation type standard what those delays were. So at the end of every day you can say, okay, well that gets snippet, that caused 3 hours worth of delays for a 24-hour period. In which case that might be a pretty big deal and you might be losing some money because of that.
All right. Great. So then I guess one more question here we've got is, so you mentioned that you have both application and network monitoring solutions. Can both solutions work with your dashboards?
Yes. Both of those solutions tie into the dashboard piece so that you can create a panel that makes up a dashboard that will look seamless. So you can compare right next to each other both network data and application data. What you guys saw earlier was solely application data, but in the event that I did have a network appliance in the data center, I could very well have created a quick panel and put that right next to my application data.
All right. And I think that is actually the last question that we have in the list right now. Does anybody else have any other questions? Go ahead and input them into your into the GoToMeeting questions bubble now. Yeah, all right. So I do see a question in here asking if this session is going to be available later. It will be. It'll be available for download on the XTIVIA website, and you know, we'll send out an email to all attendees noting where that was. I believe. Ray, that's the process we follow, correct? Yeah, I believe that's basically that's what we do. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
That's correct, Keith.
Yes. So absolutely, it will be available later. Okay, I think that it sounds like that's the last of the questions that we had for this session. So I will pass control back over to, again, Brian or Ray. I don't recall who does the wrap up.
Yeah, I can handle it. It's fine. So guys, definitely, you know, really nice to work with all you guys. I really appreciated all the questions. Those are really insightful. I know you guys are passionate about making a difference in your business from the types of questions that you submitted. So, you know, there's two ways to contact us for more information or for personal demos or follow-up meetings or just questions. You can either contact myself, which is right there. You can feel free to take a screenshot of this right here if you want. But my email is just simply bhoward@riverbed.com. Also, my sales partner, Nir Grin, VP of Business Development for XTIVIA, feel free to contact him as well. And there's his email address as well. So either one, we're going to collaborate to serve you best. And this could be a follow-up meeting for, you know, a peer group or manager. It could be just some additional questions, whatever it might be. We're happy to help. We're here to, and we enjoy working with you guys. So thanks for everything. And I guess, you know, feel free to check out the recording later on and share that around as well. So with that, I think we're done. And we appreciate you guys attending today.
Thanks very much for attending, and thanks again, Brian and Brandon, for taking the time to put this together, and great job. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.